Eventually they too fell into the water and were drowned. All over the water were men in small boats or makeshift rafts. Some even had oars, which they tried to use, but the waters were fierce and stormy, and there was nowhere to go. In time, all were drowned, until at last there was no one left but an old man and his wife, Deucalion and Pyrrha. These two people had lived in truth and justice, unlike the rest of mankind. They had been warned of the coming of the flood, and had built a boat and stopped it. For 9 days and nights they floated until Zeus took pity on them, and they came to the top of Mount Parnassus, the sacred home of the Muses. There they found land and disembarked to wait while the gods recalled the water they had unloosed. When the waters fell, Deucalion and Pyrrha looked over the land, despairing. Mud and sea slime covered the earth. All living things had been swept away. Slowly and sadly, they made their way down the mountain until they came to a temple where there had been an oracle. Black seaweed dripped from the pillars now, and the mud was over all. Nevertheless, the two knelt down and kissed the temple steps, while Deucalion prayed to the goddess to tell them what they should do. All men were dead but themselves, and they were old. It was impossible that they should have children to people the earth again. Out of the temple a great voice was heard, speaking strange words. "Depart," it said, "with veiled heads and loosened robes, and throw behind you as you go the bones of your mother." Pyrrha was in despair when she heard this saying. "The bones of our mother?" she cried. "How can we tell now where they lie? Even if we knew, we could never do such a dreadful thing as to disturb their resting place and scatter them over the earth like an armful of stones."
1072.
"Stones," said Deucalion quickly. "That must be what the goddess means. After all, earth is our mother, and the other thing is too horrible for us to suppose that a goddess would ever command it." Accordingly, both picked up armfuls of stones, and as they went away from the temple with faces veiled, they cast the stones behind them. From each of those Deucalion cast sprang up a man, and from Pyrrha's stones sprang women. Thus the earth was repeopled, and in the course of time it brought forth again animals from itself, and all was as before. Only from that time men had been less sensitive, and have found it easier to endure toil and sorrow and pain, since now they are descended from stones.
You'll remember in our study of Psalm of Life, dust thou art, to dust returnest, was not spoken of the soul, that idea that we're actually walking dirt. Here now we'll have a rendition of the flood story. We have a lot of these. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Babylonian epic, we have a flood narrative. Of course, we have a flood narrative in the Bible. In the book of Genesis, very similar. Here, notice, there's 3 elements to this story. Let's put them at level 1. 1. Obviously, we've got Zeus and his and the gods' concerns that humans are no longer properly reverencing the gods. 2, there's a flood that is sent, and every human on the planet drowns, except for, of course, Deucalion and Pyrrha, the only man and woman remaining. When all of the waters go away, their little boat that they're in with their supplies lands on Mount Parnassus, where the Muses live. The Muses are the goddesses that poets and artists will ask to be inspired by. They end up at a temple. They hear a voice that says, throw the bones of your mother behind you on the ground. They decide, you know what, we're not talking about the actual bones, we're talking about stones. And so that's where all humans then somehow repeople the world. And this is why humans are tough, because we come from stones. All right, let's now jump to 2a really quickly to finish this reading. What for you are the major themes, messages from these different readings? The quest to explain the unexplainable. Where do humans come from? Why is there pain and suffering in the world? These are questions that are going to be answered through stories, namely myths that have been handed down. Myths and stories, of course, will have different permeations and will sound differently in different cultures, and yet they all kind of come back to the same thing. So this is a major message. Humans have an intense desire to know. In other words, it isn't just women who are curious. Hey, do you remember that part of the story of the Odyssey? When Odysseus gets all of the winds tied up by Ilios, the god of the winds, and he goes to sleep, and they're right off the coast of Ithaca. They're almost home, and then it's his men who have to open the bag thinking that there's gold inside and let everything, all the winds out, and that's why they get blown off course. Both men and women possess this level of curiosity, and an important part of this message, it's a good thing, not a bad thing. That curiosity, that wonder, is a part of what we have been given from Prometheus, and to that degree, our desire to conquer, our desire to overcome any number of challenges, pain, suffering, and all the like. At 2b, the primary symbolism obviously is here at play. Prometheus himself becomes the key symbol, doesn't he? That key symbol of what? Defiance, rebellion, right? At 3a, what is your favorite story, text, that plays around with some of the ideas here? What's your favorite myth story that you have in a text that's played out? Is there a film that comes to mind? By the way, you're living in a time when there's a whole lot of the comics of an earlier generation that are now being made into movies, yes? But notice how many of those texts borrow heavily from these kinds of myths of the Greek and of the Roman traditions. Finally, at 3b, what is for you your favorite kind of story about the originations and where we come from? Where do you think you came from? Where do you think that all life form came from? Is there a way to explain that for you? Are there stories that you have either accepted or rejected that play that game? And this question, can you explain why there's bad stuff in the world? Why? Why does there have to be pain and suffering and evil? The theodicy question, why? In our senior year, put this at 3a, we'll come back to study Milton's Paradise Lost, and we'll be given one more theodicy, one more answer to the theodicic question, why is there bad stuff in the world? Well, I hope these texts, these myths, these stories are ones that have maybe challenged you to give some consideration to your own ideas, answers. Thank you.